Okay, today I am going to discuss the text The Hound of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is an English writer. His full name is Sir Arthur Ignatius Conan Doyle, and he is one of the most popular English crime fiction writer or writer of the detective genre. Besides, he wrote some historical novels, but he is much known for his detective fictions, especially fictions of Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes is one of his major creations, and Sherlock Holmes series became very much popular in England as well as across the world. The first fiction that came up with this character, Sherlock Holmes, detective character like Feluda or Auguste Dupin of what is his name? Edgar Allan Poe or Miss Marple of Agatha Christie. Now, Sherlock Holmes, the first fiction that brought the character in front of people is A Study in the Scarlet, that was composed at the age of 27. Immediately after publication of this novel, this detective character became very much popular among people, and many publishers came up to the writer for publication of this kind of detective genre. And naturally, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who was, besides being a writer, a doctor by profession, he started writing many of the Sherlock Holmes novels and stories. And once upon a time, he became fed up with this character. But the character became very much popular and remained popular for a long period of time. At that time, our Arthur Conan Doyle, he started writing some historical novels, and in order to put concentration on historical novels, he wanted to discontinue with this character, and for that sake he demanded too much money from the publishers for publication of Sherlock Holmes series. And surprisingly, everyone was ready. The publishers were ready with that amount, and in this way, Conan Doyle became the highest paid author of England at that time. However, later on, in 1893, around 1893, exactly on 1893, he came up with the book The Final Problem, and in that book he suddenly ended this character. In fact, he declared the death of the much popular Sherlock Holmes, and people become very much frustrated, annoyed. Many of his relatives, his readers, many people requested him to revive this character, but he did not do that and continue with his historical novels. Okay, but what happened next? In 1901, he again, because of immense pressure by the readers and publishers, he again came up with this character of Sherlock Holmes and came up with the book, this very book we are going to read, we are going to discuss, The Hound of the Baskervilles. And with the publication of this book, the character of Sherlock Holmes became popular again. It became a major success. It was translated in various languages across the globe. It was turned into films, and it became a huge success, and that is why it is included in the syllabus of the university, and still it is read widely. It is sold across the globe. and still the movie made on this text is watched by millions of people. Now, the text is The Hound of the Baskervilles, and from my little introduction, you perhaps know about this character, Sherlock Holmes. You have come to know about this character, Sherlock Holmes, and this character is one of the most popular detective characters of all times. I named some detective characters, and we have already discussed the Golden Fortress, which is the main character of which is none other than Feluda. And here we find Sherlock Holmes is playing the role of Feluda. What Feluda does in the Golden Fortress, Sherlock Holmes does here. He is the fact finder, he is the investigator, he is the detective and the protagonist of this fiction. Though he is not present in the middle part or in the very beginning and middle part of the fiction, but his presence is always felt, so we can call him the protagonist of the novel. Now, talking about this text, The Hound of the Baskervilles. Hound, you may be aware of certain kind of dogs. Hound is a kind of dog, and Baskervilles is the family name, so the Hound of the Baskervilles. Here we find the presence of Hound, mysterious Hound, in the Baskervilles Hall or around the Baskervilles Hall, and there is also a legend of the Baskervilles family. The legend is about a mysterious killer hound. We'll come to that. Now, talking about this text, The Hound of the Baskervilles, this text was actually published in a serial mode. The author wrote it in 1901, and it came up as a book in 1902, that means in the 20th century, and it became very much popular. People immediately accepted it, and it got much popularity. And I have also mentioned that this text was transformed into film also. Now, in this book, we find the main character is none other than who? Sherlock Holmes. And Sherlock Holmes resides in London. He's a detective, and his address is 221B Baker Street. If you read other fictions of this character, you will find this address again and again. 221B Baker Street, where Sherlock Holmes lives, and he is frequented by his friend Dr. Watson, who is his sidekick or assistant. He is a doctor, and he helps Sherlock Holmes with many of his capacities. Now we see the text begins in London, and we see a character whose name is Dr. James Mortimer. Dr. James Mortimer, who is a family doctor of the Baskerville family or Baskervilles, is a good human being. He was a doctor. In fact, he is a doctor. He comes. He in fact came to meet Sherlock Holmes, and after waiting for a while, he did not find Sherlock Holmes, either Sherlock Holmes or Watson, and he left the place. But he left his walking stick, the cane walking stick that was left by him, and we find Sherlock Holmes and Watson both are trying to guess about Dr. James Mortimer by the stick that he has left. Both of them had not seen Dr. James Mortimer, but they're trying to guess his character, his appearance from the cane or walking stick left by that person. And here we find a mini mystery before the actual event of the text. And we see both of them started making some guess about this character, and then we find Dr. James Mortimer again visiting them, and we find that the guesses made by Sherlock Holmes, in many cases his guesses were right, whereas some guesses made by Watson are not correct. So in this way we find that Sherlock Holmes is very much capable of guessing human beings by their belongings. Then Dr. James Shepherd, he told Sherlock Holmes that he is here. He tells Sherlock Holmes that he is here for a problem. In fact, he has come to seek Sherlock Holmes's help. In fact, he had a good friend, Mr. Charles Baskervilles, belonging to the Baskerville Hall or Baskerville family. That good friend of him died suddenly, and the cause of the death, though it is medically it is said it is because of heart attack he died, but being a family doctor he knows that Charles died because of terror. He was too much apprehended, and at the time of his death his face became crooked because of too much apprehension. He saw something mysterious, something terrible, and he died. Now he tells Sherlock Holmes by bringing up a manuscript from his bag. In fact, he reads that manuscript to Sherlock Holmes. He says that this manuscript is about this Baskervilles family and the family curse. He wants to read it to Sherlock Holmes, and he starts reading that manuscript. And according to the manuscript, one of the ancestors of this Baskervilles family, Hugo Baskerville, the name of the ancestor is Hugo Baskerville. That fellow was lecherous, and he kidnapped a girl of a farmer who was not ready to marry him, and locked that girl in the upper chamber. And being panicked when the girl fled away from his home, I mean this Baskerville Hall, he chased that girl in the open heath or moor which is around that Baskerville Hall. Open heath or moor. The Baskerville Hall is situated in a place which is wild, in between, I mean in the middle of a moor or a wild place full of stones and boglands and full of wild things. And what happened when this news came to Mr. Hugo Baskerville that the girl has fled away? He started chasing her with some of his companions. Also, some of his companions also came up later, and ultimately it was found that the girl is dead on the moorland, and a wild, terrible hound, black hound, has attacked Mr. Hugo Baskervilles, and it was tearing his throat. In fact, this is how Hugo Baskervilles died, because of the attack of that terrible hound, black hound, mysterious hound. The hound is kind of a superstitious hound, which is hardly believable, and this kind of hound is not generally seen. Now, what happens next? after the death of Hugo Baskervilles, many of his ancestors, many of his predecessors, many of the family members died sudden death and violent death. And death of Charles, who was Dr. James's friend, his death is also abnormal. And now Dr. James thinks that the cause of death of Charles may be that mysterious hound, that legendary hound, that mythical hound, that which might have come again. Now, Mr. James Mortimer, he says that being a family friend and well-wisher, being a family doctor, it is his duty to save the family. Since the nephew of Mr. Charles, who is no more, the nephew lives in Canada, he is coming to inherit this property, and in spite of knowing the legend, this nephew of Charles, whose name is Henry does not believe in all these things, and he wants to live in the Baskerville Hall. Dr. James Mortimer wants to save this family, and in this regard, in order to solve this mysterious hound, the legend of the mysterious hound and sudden death of these family members, he seeks help from Sherlock Holmes. And Sherlock Holmes, naturally, is a detective. He becomes interested in this case, and after that we see Henry Baskervilles. He comes from Canada to London and visits Sherlock Holmes and informs that one of his boots was lost. And he was also, and it is also informed that he has been threatened with a letter that he must leave this hall to save his life. Now the case becomes very much interesting for Sherlock Holmes, because he likes this kind of cases. When there is the smell of mystery, when there is this kind of threatening, this kind of tension elements, he naturally becomes attractive to all these things. Now he takes the case, and in order to take care of Henry Baskervilles, he sends Watson along with Baskerville and Mr. James Mortimer in the Baskerville Hall in the Dartmoor, Devonshire, where the Baskerville Hall is situated. He sends them and stays back in London. In fact, Sherlock Holmes stays back in London to solve some of his problems, and he tells them that he's going to join them soon. And then we find Watson along with two of these. One is James Mortimer, the doctor, and another is Henry Baskervilles. They move to the Baskerville Hall in the Dartmoor, Devonshire, which is in the west of England. Then we find the description of this land and this Baskerville Hall. This Baskerville Hall is a huge mansion, a huge building situated in the middle of a jungle. In fact, this is not only a jungle, it's a stony, hilly place. There is also a bog, a pool of water, and there is also a place named Grimpenmire. There is Grimpenmire, which is full of clay, mire. If one unknown person, many people have died there. If one unknown person visits that place, he will dip himself in the mire. That means it's clay. He will be unable to come up out of the clay. The clay is such sticky. and vulnerable and fatal. Now this place, which is a wild place, and the Baskerville family. This is the estate of Baskerville family, and this place is also very much wild and very much dangerous. Many people have lost their lives, and it is very much challenge to live in that place. Some families are there; they live in this place, but hardly any gentlemen live here. Some very few gentlemen live here. One good family is there. The name of the family is Stapleton family. They have Merrypit House. The name of the house of the Stapleton family is Merrypit House. Then we find there is Mr. Frankland. He also lives here, and he has daughter. The name of the daughter is Laura Lyons. Mr. Stapleton lives here. Mr. Stapleton is once upon a time he was a teacher. Now he lives here. He takes interest in butterflies. He's a studious person, not very, slim. Sometimes he's short-tempered. He has he has a sister. He has a sister whose name is Beryl Stapleton. We will discuss her. We will mention her as Miss Stapleton. Now we see these characters live in that place, the heath of Dartmoor. Now we see. Okay, another thing, the Baskerville Hall is taken care by two caretakers, Mr. John Barrymore and Miss Barrymore. They are husband and wife. They take care of the Baskerville family. When these three characters, Henry Baskervilles, the ancestor, the inheritor of this property, then Dr. Watson, the assistant of Sherlock Holmes, and Dr. James Mortimer, when they reach the Baskerville villa or house, they are received by these two characters, Barrymore, Mr. Barrymore and Mrs. Barrymore. They are caretaker and they receive them. Dr. Watson, after watching this villa and this place, becomes very much thoughtful and terrified because of this kind of life here in the midst of jungle. He lives in